and welcome to MedCity's Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Arundhati Parmar. I'm recovering from a cold, so please excuse my voice in this episode. Once in a while, we give a slight nod to the name of this podcast, which was created during the pandemic when businesses were pivoting left and right. Now, some of those pivots proved to be temporary, but today we're talking to an executive from a company where the pivot meant the difference between staying in business and shuttering. I'm referring to Fujifilm that faced an existential crisis back in 2000 when almost overnight people stopped buying camera film because they were switching to digital cameras. So what did Fujifilm do? It did a massive pivot to become a healthcare company. Today, the company is a legitimate contract development manufacturing organization for the life sciences industry. Our guest is Lars Petersen, President and Chief Executive Officer of Fujifilm's biotechnologies business. Hello and welcome, Lars, to the MedCity Pivot Podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm absolutely curious about the questions and where you want to take this. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. I mean, the name of the podcast, Pivot, should give you a clue, given you sort of fit into that discussion. So let's actually start there. You know, I grew up in India, Fujifilm, Kodak, all these were a large part of my life, in the 80s and 90s. So tell me a little bit about when you decided that, okay, the film needs to be history and we need to evolve into something else.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And to your story, right, I still get, you can say, emails and texts from people who meet the name Fujifilm in the ruralest places of the world, right? Because Fujifilm is such a strong brand. It's approaching Coca-Cola status. In every country, they would know the little film that was so important in Fujifilm's history, right?
Right.
Which is a very, very strong thing for us to have a brand like Fujifilm. So I would say the entire story for the, you can say, the modernization or where Fujifilm is heading now really start in the middle of the 2000s. Basically, 2006 was a really pivot year because this year, you can say, after some years with a digital camera, suddenly people started changing rapidly into a digital camera. And at that point, it hurt the traditional film industry quite significant. And some companies went bankrupt, as you may know or may remember. And it's actually a pretty known business story that Fujifilm went into, you can say, into a meeting room and say, hey, how do we not see this happening again? We lost about, I think I hear the number 60% of the revenue basically in 1 year.
Wow.
After just becoming number one in making film in the entire world, right? And therefore they sit down, they decided we need to diversify. We need to create a strategy that are much more long-term. And this really gave birth to, you can say, the vision of Fujifilm becoming a healthcare company. That started that year in 2006.
So let's break that down a little bit because there were other companies in the same place or in the same boat that Fujifilm was, right? Like Agfa, like Kodak. How would you compare the way Fujifilm handled that pivot, given like Kodak went bankrupt in 2012, if I'm not mistaken? So
Correct.
Sort of compare and contrast sort of the different approaches. I know you probably not in those firms, but just give us a flavor of what went right with Fujifilm compared to the others.
I'm sure there's people who knows the story better than I, but what I'm told is simply you sit down and you say, we need to diversify. Fujifilm created a research center that allowed for quite some significant diversity of looking into new businesses and started a whole horde of new businesses where we ended up in 2011 starting a CDMO business, which is I am part of. So there is a number of other businesses that makes us much more, you can say, diversified as a company. Of course, I'm not really sure what other companies have done, but for Fujifilm to sit down and take it very seriously and say we need to change. This is very serious. worked absolutely well, and that journey has from then just grown from there on, right?
So help me understand a little bit. It's one thing to say we need to become something else, and it's quite another to actually achieve it. And generally, there is investment behind this. So can you talk about some of the investments that the company has made to sort of solidify that pivot into being a healthcare company?
Yeah, of course, the investment part specific to the company that I'm leading, which is the today called Fujifilm Biotechnology, is the CDMO arm, a contract manufacturing arm. In 2011, a decision was to start this company by acquiring two facilities from actually Merck Sharp and Dome at the time, and all the way up to 2019. That was actually still considered a good investment, but not a significant growth investment. And in
Mm-hmm.
2009, decision was made to acquire a much bigger investment. So investing in, you can say, more uh, large scale manufacturing capabilities. And this is actually where I came into the picture, because I was part of that acquisition on
Mm-hmm.
the I was part of being sold and or bought, if you will, because we basically took the entire organization from the company we bought it from, which was the company Biogen, and that really started the launch into a much larger investment. And since then, we actually continued that investment portfolio at a rapid pace.
Mm-hmm.
And why could you do that? And why could that be successful? Because you are in the manufacturing of medicine market, which is maybe one of the most stable growth engines you would have. Not necessarily do you just see somebody coming in and say, "Oh, Lars, you don't need medicine if you get sick. You can actually live without it." Maybe this is one of the most stable and forward-looking industries that only are getting more and more diversified, more and more complicated, more and more you can say bigger and bigger as an industry, because generally we need more and more medicine. We get older and older, and more
Right.
people have access to medicine. So we're not the only company. There has actually been other companies in the history who has diversified into healthcare.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you talked about your particular division as being a CDMO. Are there other parts of Fujifilm that do other healthcare related activities, or is it largely this?
No, we have a pretty strong medical division who makes equipment for especially surgeries. So
Okay.
utilizing that, there is a long history Fujifilm of making cameras, making
Right.
materials. So, for example, a very strong presence in colonoscopy,
Mm-hmm.
in MI scanning, in different other places where the very strong innovation engine of the company that has a history of making patents and innovation, and just utilizing that platform into other industries. Because in many ways, the technologies to make film, to make materials, are needed for in many other industries. And the more we target them, and the more we target them into life science and related industries, the more we you can say we grow the business to something we know has a long future. But we also are using similar technologies into semiconductor materials. Screens for iPhones is part of a technology invented by Fujifilm. Face recognition, AI related. Fujifilm invented the red eye recognition all the way back before we called technology AI, but it's basically AI technology that was used for that. So of course now we try to, you can say, use those backgrounds, those DNAs, that innovation to grow even the business that I'm leading, the CDMO business, into a new world. So we have a research center coming out of Tokyo that supports and work with my team of how can we actually create new technologies that can help the business, can help patients in the end. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a very strong you can say DNA to have in a company.
And can you talk a little bit about the types of therapeutic areas in which you operate? Are there, are you more in vaccines? Are you more in cell and gene therapy? Can you just talk about some of the strengths in terms of therapeutic areas where you help to,
Yeah.
manufacture medicines?
Yeah, we have early on. sort of like limit the scope. Not saying that we wouldn't expand the scope over time, but to four modalities, which is biologics, really mainly monoclonal antibodies.
Mm-hmm.
So the biologics medicine that we all know is growing very fast and rapidly becoming the main driver of medicines for basically majority of diseases. The microbial, which is related, you could also express different molecules in different way by using microbial expressors. So that's the second one. And then viral gene therapy, which we also use for vaccines, for example,
Mm-hmm.
which often are used and was used during COVID for different medicines. And then cell therapy, which is maybe the newest modality, you can say, what we all know from very personalized medicine for
Right.
rare diseases that has a significant cure. But we did early on stay away from, you can say, small molecule, or what traditionally we'll call pills
Right.
industry, which of course have a very significant presence, for example, in India and other places. But we have not focused on that part of the industry. Then you can talk about, there's of course a heavy evolution and development going on into new areas. And we try to be very focused on something that are adjacent to what our partners they like and what they focus on. For example,
Mm-hmm.
biologics medicine are now diversifying into a combination of, for example, antibodies and conjugation of drugs, right? So we call them ADCs. So this is an area that we begin to focus on. We've just started a facility in Japan that actually will open next year for making clinical end to end for anti-drug conjugates, antibody drug conjugates. And then we also, of course, are watching what is coming. Maps are becoming bispecifics, they become trispecifics, they become more complicated. As long as we relate them to these four modalities I started by mentioning,
Yeah.
we are following that very closely. Yeah,
Makes
that's
sense.
what we do.
And can you talk to me a little bit about who some of your customers are? I know Regeneron, I think last year was it that established a 10-year sort of manufacturing relationship with them. Talk to me about the types of companies that come to you
Yeah,
to
there's not so
manufacture.
much a limitation. It's mostly all innovator companies
Mm-hmm.
who is not, if they are fully dedicated to small molecule, they would necessarily not talk to us. But they can
Okay.
be anything from a company that is a startup that has very few people that
Mm-hmm.
need support very early on to basically everything. Maybe they could come with a CRISPR platform, they could come with a DNA and say, hey, we need support in every aspect of what we do. So that's from that end to all the other end, where you have the largest pharma companies in the world who either seek new, you can say, innovational inspiration or new technologies, or they seek an extension of their own network, or basically don't have time to do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So they of course very often have a lot of the knowledge and the manpower behind what we do, but
Mm-hmm.
very often it makes more sense for them to focus in other areas. So it's all over the spectrum. And I would say today we maybe work with, last time I counted, 22, 23 of the top 30 pharma companies in the world.
Wow.
And then, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60 companies that are startup companies from all over the world. So there's really no limitations. If they sort of like make research and innovation within some of these platforms that I talked about,
Right.
they would normally reach out to us once or later. That's always been what we have seen.
So let me ask you this. You have larger competitors like Samsung Biologics, Lonza, Wuxi Biologics. How do you sort of distinguish yourself from these larger competitors, and how would you catch up to these companies?
Yeah, I would say there's a number of things that differentiate us. We are Fujifilm, so we are part of a Japanese company with a very, you can say, well-known quality mark, a very a very long history from always being there with for customers. So we call ourselves partners for life.
Mm-hmm.
And when companies come to us, they can clearly see we may not necessarily always be the fastest tomorrow, but we are the company you can rely on for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. We will always be there for you.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's a lot of competition about having the right technology at the right time. And of course, we are very focused on making sure we are, uh, if not better than anyone else, at least at par. But we are very focused on building a network that we in-house both design, construct, and operate ourselves. So we differentiate ourselves by we are building everything in-house. The best comparison you can make is maybe the difference between PC companies and Apple, for example. Apple develop and design everything on their own, so everything fits. Whereas, if you buy a PC and you try to connect it to other mechanics, it doesn't always work. You need to do a couple of things to figure it out. But if
Mm-hmm.
you buy a new iPhone, it adds to your iPad immediately. So
Right.
that sort of mindset is what we have, which is completely different from other companies who may build their own network, but they also buy companies from
Yes.
or buy sites from other companies, and then suddenly you have more of a diverse set of sites that doesn't necessarily talk to each other. For us, when you come in, clients know if they start on one site, it connects. People know the other sites. Everything is the same quality system, the same computer systems, the same, you can say, planning systems, etc. So it's all part of an integral system you can call our Fujifilm ecosystem that we have given the name CodeUX. And we clearly can see people now begin to say, "Oh, can you CodeUX this into your?" Yes, we can CodeUX. So that's a big differentiation. And lastly, I would say the last differentiation is really that we are diversified all over the world in both development, small scale, and large scale. So we are not in one location. We are
Mm-hmm.
not in one scale. We basically can meet all scale, meaning if companies start with us, they don't have to go anywhere else. They can start with us and they can end with us. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have to transfer to another company because now they need another scale or another location.
Makes
So
sense.
that's why we call ourselves partners for life. You get into an ecosystem, you get into a comprehensive system.
Got it. And then one last question. How are you in the CDMO world looking at artificial intelligence? How is AI changing what you've done?
Yeah, so AI is, of course, a very interesting technology that we all are now being brought into. It comes with a lot of technologies you put in. The way we look at it is we are putting in a CodeUX system that we know is comprehensive across our sites. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, we are much more ready to enable that all these facilities can be applied to AI, because AI will now help if we want to compare data from one side to another. We have the same foundation, the same design. That means that AI can much easier compare between the sites. So
Mm-hmm.
we basically are calling it, we are using CodeUX to enable AI for our partners.
Any final thoughts you want people to take away?
I think there maybe a final thoughts for people listening is that there's no question that we are in an industry where transformation and bringing medicine to patients is in rapid change. So
Mm-hmm.
we are out there with the message. We don't have to make medicines like we used to do, where every company think for themselves and have to build their own supply chain. You can actually go out and find partners like us who has thought about an ecosystem where most companies can use the same assets, the same platform, the same ecosystem. They can even be part of our ecosystem. That is what we believe is the best service we can give for patients. Instead of being isolated, we look at this as a comprehensive ecosystem. That's maybe the most important message for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Lars.
Absolutely. Thank you to you too.